Well, apparently Catholics, at least in the state of Oklahoma, have way more heart and backbone than the average evangelical Protestant, because the archdiocese there fought and won the right to have the very first ever publicly funded Catholic charter school. So this made news and created some controversy from some people who hate God, hate religion, and deeply misunderstand the separation of church and state. So we'll talk about all that. But a quote from a local news outlet about what took place says this, quote, St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School would be the country's first religious charter school, which by definition is a publicly funded school that is privately run. Notre Dame Law School's Religious Liberty Initiative clinic advised the Catholic Archdiocese of Oklahoma City and the Diocese of Tulsa, which spearheaded the application for the school. The process for St. Isidore of Seville started when Archbishop of Oklahoma City Paul Coakley notified the state in November of 2021 that the archdiocese would be applying for authorization to form and operate a virtual charter school. So essentially all this means is that there would be taxpayer dollars that would fund a Catholic school. Now, this was already happening in limited fashion, but not completely funded as this charter school would be. Now, the DA for the state of Oklahoma quickly spoke out against this and called it a slippery slope. So here's his comment.
Well, the current AG telling the board today the school, quote, intends to be a fully Catholic school, Catholic in every way, Catholic in teaching, Catholic in employment, and that would, quote, clearly violate the First Amendment and the Oklahoma Constitution for a public school. Drummond goes on to say the approval of the SISBC application will create a slippery slope and open the door to other religious schools to use taxpayer money.
So the idea here is just wait until the Muslims start their own school and the Satanists start their own school. What will you Christians think about this then? Great whataboutism. So why do they think this is a good argument? I've heard this very often about the Second Amendment. Leftists and liberals will say, oh, you just wait until black people start exercising their Second Amendment right. Then will you really be about the Second Amendment, you white Christian nationalists? And of course, the answer to that is yes, we rejoice whenever there is anybody who is practicing their Second Amendment right in a responsible way. We don't care about the color of their skin, much like you seem to always care about the color of people's skin. So the reality is there's a lot of things going on here. But first and foremost, can I just please define democracy for everybody here? It's the will of the people in the form of policy. So if the Satanists want to start their own school and they want it publicly funded, that's fine. Create your own school, but let's make sure that you only get funded insofar as you are able to enroll students. So in other words, when the Christian school has 500 students and you have 0 students at your school, let's make sure that we understand that you get publicly funded only insofar as you are able to enroll students. So the will of the people, sure. If there are Satanists out there that want to start their own school that nobody on the planet would ever go to, have at it, friend. And the same thing with the Muslim and everybody else. The reality is just simply this. There's this idea about the separation of church and state that is vastly overblown and deeply misunderstood on this issue. I'll explain, but first, let me exemplify it for you here. So here are 2 local newscasters, one of which suggesting that the separation of church and state is a constitutional right.
Learn. Stephanie Haynes is joining us right now live to explain all of this. And I think a lot of people would question whether they're for it or against it. Is this constitutional?
Well, Adrian, that is certainly the question that is going to come up in court, as certain groups have already indicated they would like to challenge this, saying, as you are questioning, does this violate the First Amendment, the separation of church and state?
If I had a dime for every time I heard somebody say that the separation of church and state is found in the Constitution, I would be a millionaire by now. But of course, in Joe Biden's economy, I'm going to need a little bit more than that. So keep on racking up your misinformation, people. The reality is that the separation of church and state is not found in the Constitution anywhere. Separation of church and state is a phrase found in a letter that was written by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist. And even when he was placing it there, he was saying that the government will not infringe upon your private right to practice your religion. He was not saying that we should institute this secular state where Christian morality has no place in society. That would be totally ridiculous. It's totally foolish. So the first Amendment and the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment says this. It says that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of any religion or the free exercise thereof. So let me break this down for you very briefly. That clause just simply means this in the First Amendment. It means that the government cannot establish a state church and then force people to go to it. That's what it means by the establishment of religion. And then secondly, that it cannot prohibit the free exercise thereof. So in other words, the First Amendment gives people the right to practice their religion, not to keep people away from practicing their religion in the public square. Think about it this way. The First Amendment is about free speech. We all know that as the Free Speech Amendment. You know, we say we have the right to free speech, and then we have the Second Amendment is the right to protect that right to free speech. So how does it make sense that the right to free speech is construed as the right to cram down secularism upon people and make sure that their private religion has no place in the public square? Of course, that would be ridiculous. Think about it this way. Our laws in this nation are undeniably influenced by Christian scripture. Now, if they're not, I would love to know where that thou shalt not kill thing comes from, because it doesn't come from secular ideology. It is undeniable that Christianity has influenced and still influences some of the way that we think about all of these things. Now, suffice to say, the whole idea that this is in some way unconstitutional for public funds from taxpayers to go to fund a Catholic school is totally ridiculous, and it is not unconstitutional. You can only do that by reading into the original language of the Constitution and putting your own secular viewpoint upon it. And that's what most people won't recognize, is that they have a presupposition that they're bringing to the Constitution and trying to infuse that upon it. Now, it's not our fault that you don't like Christians, you don't like Jesus, and you don't like Christianity as a whole. But the reality is that this whole thing about there being this neutral state government that doesn't take a moral side on anything is totally ridiculous. The lie of neutrality is on full display here. And it's on full display in this way. Right now, the funds of taxpayers are going to fund the public school system, or in other words, a non-neutral left-wing indoctrination factory. That's where our public funds are going right now. They are already not neutral. They're funding left-wing indoctrination factories. And if that were even worth the case, let me ask you the question. Where are all the TikToks of the Christian teachers, kind of whispering into the camera saying, today I got to share about Jesus with my students, and I even had a student pray the sinner's prayer. Oh, it's so great. No, that's not happening. You know why? Because the left-wing indoctrination factories are actually teaching small children and middle schoolers and high schoolers left-wing gender ideology. They're teaching people that men can be women and women can be men, and that men can menstruate and that men can get pregnant, and that men can play in women's sports. And it's funny how this is all men cramming things down on women, but nonetheless, pay attention, feminists. It's interesting to me that all the TikToks that we see are teachers talking about making sure that they teach children about appropriate pronoun usage. So, of course, we all know the reality is that the public school is not neutral when it comes to morality. They are in every way, as much as they possibly can, shifting further and further and further to the left. Now, that is not to say that every single teacher or every single school district in the nation is all a bunch of left-wing indoctrination factories exclusively. But that is to say this, there is a double standard here. And I hope you're honest enough, intellectually honest enough, to realize that this is true. So what would be the big problem at the end of the day for just having a school for every segment? Fine. I'm for universal school choice. I'm fine with the public funding schools, even if you disagree with it, since we're already doing it now, as long as the students and the parents get to make those decisions for the kids and those funds are appropriated apportionately. More than that, I also want to say this. I'm a free speech absolutist, and that means it is incumbent upon the people who want to oppose free speech to argue for why free speech should not be heard in the first place. So it is incumbent upon those in the Oklahoma city school districts to tell us why the government should not be funding a Catholic school. And I think ultimately what you'll find is a bunch of Christian hate at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about left-wing ideology being promoted in public schools, and we're talking about religion not being in public schools, you have to ask yourself why that double standard. Because it's interesting, because left-wing gender ideology is basically a complete fabrication of deconstructionists. And religion actually has been a part of world history since civilizations have existed. Christianity, Judaism, Islam. I believe that comparative religion should be taught in every single public school across America. And you say, well, who's going to teach that? Well, how about not an idiot atheist that wants to turn everybody into an atheist? How about one day you get a Christian to come in, the next day you get a Buddhist to come in, the next day you get a Muslim to come in, and let's let free speech have its way. The reason the left is so afraid of free speech is because they understand the power of ideas. If they're not crammed down people's throat, the truth can actually win. And so I believe that free speech demands that we have the opportunity to allow this Catholic school to come out, do its thing, to be publicly funded, and then if it is successful and if it is good, then to be promoted. But unfortunately, that's not even what we do with government schools today. You can fail, you can make sure kids don't read, have math skills, or anything else, and then you can still get government funding. But all of that is a side note to the more important point. The reason I'm a free speech absolutist is because I truly believe and think that Christianity is the superior idea. I believe if given the opportunity to have the freedom to operate within the public square and to have its way, that ultimately Christianity will win the day because it is replete with so much important information, so many deep truths, and so much spiritual nourishment that it is undeniable. See, the only way the left has won in America is through the suppression of the truth, because whenever the truth is allowed to flourish, it makes people better. So look at the world as we shift further from Christ. It gets more suicidal, more dangerous, and less meaningful. But the more we uphold the spiritual truths of the past, the greater our society becomes. So if you ask me, we need more charter schools like this one in Oklahoma, and I hope we see more and more of it, along with more free speech and the proliferation of the best ideas. So may the best idea win. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and to go with God. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely want to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.